Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gostola, managing editor for Shadowproof, and I'd like to welcome you to this video. It's a very important video. There's this article posted on Ziggy Tordarson, who is a witness and FBI informant in the case against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. The outlet is Stunden. Stunden is an Icelandic media our Icelandic newspaper. And Bjartmar Anderson had a interview with Ziggy, and a major report was published a month or two ago, actually almost 2 months ago. And there are clips now that have been posted from it. He was able to talk to Ziggy for around 9 hours and hear his defense or hear him go through his crimes and deceptions as somebody who had been trusted by WikiLeaks, who wound up betraying them by essentially engaging in several acts that made it impossible for him to ever be taken seriously. Again, not to mention, he is now committed crimes and been convicted of those crimes in Iceland. So, who is Ziggy Tordarson? At the time he was 17 years old. He was working as a volunteer with Assange, and the indictment claims that he allegedly asked to commit computer intrusions. That Assange allegedly asked him to commit computer intrusions and steal audio recordings of conversations between high-ranking officials of a NATO country. He also allegedly instructed Tordarson or Ziggy to break into someone's computer and delete chat logs. This minor, so to speak, is referred to as a teenager in the indictment. And this is in the latest one, the one that came just a couple of months before they had the major extradition hearing, the one that lasted for a whole entire month, September 2020, exactly a year ago. So exactly a year ago, they were having the witnesses come forward and give testimony in the extradition case. Ziggy is someone who was convicted in Iceland of fraud, theft, and impersonation of Julian Assange. He forged a letter and switched an account so that he could embezzle $50,000 at least in funds from the WikiLeaks store. This account that was supposed to be fundraising for Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks organization. The Icelandic Monitor reported in 2015 that Tordarson was sentenced to 3 years in prison for, quote, sexual violations against 9 boys, end quote. He abused one boy over 40 times over the period of 2 years when the boy was aged 15 to 17, and each boy was promised, quote, payment in exchange for oral and anal sex. And Ziggy also offered to, quote, pay for things such as internet connections, telephone bills, and television subscriptions, and even to open up overseas bank accounts, end quote. And to him, this is all just prostitution. This is all fine behavior. Even though, pay attention to the age, these are people who are younger than Ziggy, and Ziggy is now 28 years old, and he is engaged in this conduct on a regular basis. Tordarson, an FBI informant, begged agents for money. They eventually paid him $5,000 for, quote, work he missed while meeting with agents in Alexandria, Virginia, where the grand jury investigation in WikiLeaks was impaneled. So around that time that the WikiLeaks grand jury was set up, he's looking for a way out of the mess he created for himself, and he's agreeing to turn against Julian Assange and work with the FBI if he can get paid. The defense for Julian Assange also notes that the Icelandic interior minister of the time ordered a number of FBI prosecutors who had arrived in Iceland to investigate Ziggy's claims to leave Iceland. The interior minister made statements and has made statements since that he believes the investigation was in order to frame Assange. So Ziggy, with the FBI, has been working to entrap or frame Assange all throughout the last decade. And his role in this case, in the indictment, is sort of the last move he had available to salvage himself after coming in to so much trouble criminally in Iceland. And so now let me get to the video that I have here put together. These are the clips that are from Stunden. This is Stunden's clips. These are not my clips. This is from Bjartmar Anderson's interview with Ziggy Tordarson. And these are the clips that were posted recently, most recently on September 7th at Stunden. I encourage you, if you have not read the article that Bjartmar Anderson did a month or two ago, a couple months ago, go read it. It has the full details. It gives all the context for what you are about to hear from Ziggy, but also go look at the posting that was put up that has some of the additional context for this these clips that I'm about to share. So without any more hemming and hawing, let me share this screen so we can all hear the audio here. And let's watch this. So we've got the first clip, and I'm going to be going through these one by one. Each clip is anywhere from 45 seconds to 2 minutes. There's about 15 minutes of clips here. So grab yourself something good to drink, a coffee, a tea, some water, maybe go get a snack, and sit back and let's dig into the sociopathy of this FBI informant who is an absolute disgrace. And but his involvement is representative of this political case. You know, the fact that he is involved is a feature of this reprehensible action by the Justice Department that continues right now against the publisher who is jailed at Belmarsh prison. So here's the first clip. The first clip, what you need to understand about the first clip is that he's talking about giving Assange a USB stick. And the claim in the indictment is that there are files on it. And these are files that were hacked. But if you listen to this, he has no idea what files were on the stick. And in fact, he doesn't know if there even were files on the USB stick. It could have been entirely empty. So here's the first clip.
Með USB-líkil með símtöluna. Ok, þannig að hann fékk þessi símtöl.
Allavega skránar, ég hlusta ekki á það, þannig ég dekti hvað á í það.
Var ekkert, þið langaði ekkert að kíkja og heyra, ég meina, hvað var þetta stór fæll?
Ég man ekki hvað, ég var að gera eitthvað, þannig ég hugsaði bara, ég bara hendur Júlían hann fyrir yfir þetta.
Ok, en ég meina, hvað var þetta stór fæll? Þú veist, þetta hefur þá, var þetta 16 gigabit eða 32 gigabit?
Nei, þetta hefur farið á 34-64 gigabit disk eitthvað.
Sagði þú við eftir?
All right, so that's the first clip. And that clip, as I said, is him basically conceding that he's telling a lie to the prosecutors in order to help them nail a very well-respected, or should be well-respected, someone who's done award-winning journalism, in order to nail this publisher who exposed criminality, abuses, and all sorts of other things about the United States. And by the way, There's no such thing as a 34 gigabyte memory stick. It is 32 gigabytes. And I only say this because one of the aspects of Ziggy's claims and the things that he says is you learn from him speaking that he really doesn't understand how to use computers, and he's not that tech savvy. And so for him to exist in this world with WikiLeaks, he never really picked up on some of the more basic things that you would know. And I get to be nerdy like that because those things actually do go to your credibility about who you are as a person. I mean, you would know the different sizes of a USB stick, and he just doesn't grasp those basic things. The number 2 clip that we're going to get to here is that like we're talking about here, he's admitting to this core claim being false. And again, the claim is that he hacked into computers, that Assange hacked into computers to obtain information, including audio recordings of phone conversations between high-ranking officials, including members of the parliament, of the government of, and it's Iceland, is NATO country 1 in the indictment. So, I give you the rest of this. This is the second clip.
Sagði þú við FBI
Að ég hafi hakkað það?
Já.
Nei.
og að Assange hafi beðið að hakka það?
Nei.
En af hverju stendur það þá í ákærunni?
Get ekki svaraði.
Er það að þú vilt það ekki eða er það FBI getur ekki svaraði?
Ég get ekki svaraði.
Af hverju getur ekki svaraði?
Af því ég má það ekki. Svo mikið af spurningum sem hafði aldrei komið áður sem hefði það ekki mikið sens.
Ok. Þannig að það var sem sagt verið að reyna að opna nýjan þráð eins og ég hef heimildi fyrir.
Nýjan þráð.
Sem sagt að vera að fara yfir aðra málaflokka.
Já.
Heldur að fara áður yfir.
Já.
Já. Og þeir málaflokkar snerust að reyna að extenda rannsóknina inn á önnur svið. Heldur en eru í þessari ákæru.
Þekki það ekki.
Þekkir það ekki eða máttu ekki segja það?
Annarkvort.
Þú voru að velja, Siggi. Þú voru að velja.
Ég get ekki tjá með það.
Ok, þess að þú mátt ekki segja það.
Já.
Ok.
He's not allowed to comment, but what we're talking about there is basically that Ziggy went to the United States at some point in the last year after this indictment, and he went ahead and I guess the FBI was trying to make sure his story was still straight. They probably coached him, who knows? And and also I'm seeing that I was speaking while I was muted. I apologize, trying to do a couple things all at once, and I made the mistake of not unmuting myself. But you heard that last clip, and what we're getting here is this picture of Ziggy. So let's continue on. I won't mute myself so that we can keep doing this fairly smoothly. So this is the fourth clip here that is featured. And what you're going to hear relates to something from the indictment. It says on July 21st, 2010, after Assange and teenager Ziggy, failed in their joint attempt to decrypt the file stolen from a NATO country one bank that's in Iceland, Ziggy asked a US person to try to do so. Well, who is that person? You're going to find out. In 2011 and 2012, that individual, who had been an acquaintance of Manning since early 2010, became a paid employee of WikiLeaks and reported to Assange and teenager. So let's hear this next clip.
Mars 2010 sagði Assange Manning að hafa fengið stólin bankagögn frá Source sem var raun og veru þú. Hvaða bankagögn eru það?
Það eru Milestone, það eru Glitnir, það eru...
Milestone-gögnin sem þú tókst með minnistilkynningu þegar þú tókst úr tölvuna, það ekki var bara ekki opin tölvan eða?
Ég man það ekki.
Nei.
Og það eru gögn sem að snúa að...
En þetta eru gögnin sem þú tókst, Milestone-gögnin, ekki?
Já, hann er
Já, ok.
En sko...
Er það eitthvað meira sem við erum að tala um?
Já, af því sko ég og var með lánabók Glitnis.
Ok.
Og var aldrei birt. Ég var líka með fæl sem var lánabók Landsbankans.
Ok.
Hún var dulkóðuð og ég ætlaði að fá David House til þess að aðtóa hvernig hann geti notað þessa superkompjútur í MIT til að dulkóða. Afkóða. Það er einmitt það sem að var á bara... Þetta var allstaðar sú bók, er það ekki? Það voru allir bara að reyna að dulkóða. Það var búið að ná í hana, það ekki? Jú.
En lánabók Glitnis, hvaðan kemur hún?
Ég skal segja það á þér.
Já, ok.
Okay, so he's laughing. He's laughing about this seriousness, and this loan book, the one that is he's the land banky. That one is a file that is encrypted, and if you ask Bjartmar, all of journalists in Iceland and perhaps others have this file that was downloaded, and they're trying to crack it. So it's not just Assange. This is something that's already out there related to the banking crisis in Iceland, and people would like to get in it, and they can't get into this file. And yet we have Ziggy suggesting to the FBI that Assange hacked this file. That's false. That's a lie. And so then you see here that he mentions David House. David House, for those of you not familiar, was the person who was in charge of the Manning support network during the court-martial against Chelsea Manning, someone who encountered Chelsea at MIT, someone who lived in the area, and someone who has a lot of expertise when it comes to computers, far more expertise than Ziggy. And we know there were communications ongoing between Ziggy and David House. We also know that David was called to testify before the WikiLeaks grand jury. He at one point resisted a long time ago, but in the latest iteration under Trump, it's not known what exactly he shared, but he did comply in some way with the grand jury. And so it was widely reported that he went before the grand jury. And so this all lines up. This actually is one of the few parts of the indictment that does line up, except for maybe the fact that it doesn't make it clear that these files were already floating around on the internet, and it's not Assange who was responsible for them being compromised. So let's go back to this. We'll go on to the next clip. And in this next clip that you're about to see, it gets into some of the actions of Ziggy, some of the criminal acts. And so here we go.
Áhyggjur mínar voru þær að ef ég myndi segja þeim hvernig og hvað eins og Landsvirkjun eða virkjun stjórnarráð síðan og þetta að ég yrði skotmark íslenskra yfirvalda.
Af hverju?
Og það kom að því að ég segi ef þau fengju afrit af þessum upplýsingum sem ég er að segja ykkur. Þau sögðu bara nei, það mun aldrei gerast. Það er eina umræðan sem ég hef átt við FBI varðandi
íslensk yfirvöld.
All right, so what's the terms of the immunity deal going to be? Are you going to protect me from the Icelandic authorities? It's fairly straightforward. The next clip.
Þeir segja bara við þig, hérna er staðan og þeir teikna hann upp. Sú teikning er ekkert sérstaklega falleg, samkvæmt mínum heimildum. Og jafnvel sko, einmitt þá voru þeir að fara bara benda á að þú væri bara að fara í fangelsi, ekkert eftir langa tíma. Ef þú myndir ekki svara spurningum FBI og vinna með FBI í þessu. Þú ert þá svolítið panikaður á þeim tímapunkti.
Ég horf ekki á þessum hótum.
Ok.
Af því að stating the obvious er ekki endilega hótum.
Já, en af því það sem ég finnst sko, að lögreglan á Íslandi er í raun og veru að sko segja við þig, við látum íslenska hlutina hverfa, FBI lætur bandaríska hlutina hverfa og þú gerir immunity deal við bandaríkjamenn, þá sleppum við hér heima öllu sem að getur komið þér í vandræði.
Ég veist það ekki.
That's news to him. It's news to him that he had an incentive to say whatever he could say about Assange in order to save his sorry ass. I mean, it's unbelievable to listen to him talk in this manner. And also the fact that if you look at the reporting done by Anderson in this immunity deal, not only is it excusing the crimes committed before, but then Ziggy turns around and behaves as if the immunity deal means he's untouchable. The Icelandic authorities aren't going to come after him. And I don't know if he's committing crimes that the US government would typically be interested in punishing, but you know, he feels like he can continue this criminal conduct that has been a regular part of his life. It's mentioned by Anderson that, in fact, as far as the immunity deal goes, that he believes this is sort of like a green light to go on and fleece more individuals and companies on a grander scale than ever. And Anderson points out it's usually by acquiring or forming legal entities he then uses to borrow merchandise, rent luxury cars, and even order large quantities of goods from wholesalers without any intention to pay for the goods and services. And there's a local newspaper in Iceland that is mentioned, which says that Thordarson attempted to order merchandise on credit using a new company name. He created one of the fake companies he called Icelandic Vermin Control. And there's all kinds of lengths that he'll go to in order to steal and bilk people out of money. And this is continuing while the FBI is working with Ziggy on this Assange case. So let's go to the next clip that we have here. And also let me go back and say something about the fact that he doesn't think it's a threat, that this is all hanging over his head and he could go to prison. Humans just don't have that kind of a thing going on in their world and let that go. I mean, unless you're poor, there's no incentive for you to go to prison. Unless you're homeless or you're impoverished, you're not going to want to be incarcerated. And there's no reason why Ziggy would want to go to prison, especially if he's, this kind of a person wouldn't want to be confined and unable to engage in the kinds of grifts that they're engaged in. And also, how are you going to prey on underage boys if you're in prison? Well, I mean, what are you going to do in prison when the people who are around you are your age and they're not the kinds of people you want to be with? So he's a total sociopath, and I can't believe that he would actually want to be in prison, like it would somehow save him from what lies ahead for him in his future if he doesn't work with the FBI on this case. So let's go back to this clip here, and we'll keep rolling.
Þú væri litli fiskurinn, þú vissir að þeir vildu fá stóra fiskinn og þú gafst þeim allt til þess að láta hann fá stóra fiskinn.
Jú, ég sammála þeirri sýn að það var þannig, en hugmyndin þegar ég er þarna sumarið 2011 eða whatever, þá er það ekki hugmyndin, sko.
Nei.
Það er bara þannig að þú komum út í að helviti öflugt horn og gefið þig.
Ok. Því þetta þú hlýtur að sjá þetta samt líka svolítið frá mínu sjónarhorni, hvað þetta fucking götótt, hvað þú ert undir mikilli pressu, andleg og líkamlegri, frá fucking FBI, að ef þú ert ekki að kooperata 110%, að þá ert þú bara fucked.
Þeir væru nú þegar strax búnir að afturkalla þennan samning ef ég væri að segja ósatt.
Það?
Já.
En þeir byggja rosalega mikið bara á þínum orðum.
Að það kemur svo mikið, oft í þessum samning hjá mér, ef þeir verða vísir það að ég hafi sagt eitt orð ósatt, þá immunity agreementum revoked og þeir mega að halda áfram ákærum á mig. Þeir byrta ekkert sér í ákæru hvaða sönnunargögn þeir hafa, en það það ekki þannig að réttarkerfið þarf að byrta það.
Reyndar það hluta discovery, sko, en
þegar málið fyrir dóm.
En það verið
þannig maður ákæru sem á ennþá eftir að bæta við.
Já, en þeir eru samt sem áður að þeir get ekki framlýst honum frá Bretlandi, þá þeir ekki með mál.
Dómari hafnaði ekki framsali á gögnunum, dómari hafnaði framsali út af heilbrigðisástæðum.
Akkurat.
Ætlaði að segja með það að leið og Julian fari til þess sannarslanda það verði ekki framsalsbeiðni. Það eina sem bjargar Julian núna ef Joe Biden segir bara, nei, þetta er búið.
Ok, en hvað verður þá þig?
Ég veit það ekki.
Ég meina, ef að dómsmálaráðherra Bandaríkjanna segir að þessar rannsóknir bara lokið, það verður ekki gert, út af því að Biden segir það. Hvað verður þig?
Ég með immunity agreement, hann fellur ekki niður.
Þráttur að máli verður ekki tekið fyrir?
Nei.
Þannig að þú sleppur undan öllum brotunum sem þú framkvæmdir?
Ég skil það þannig.
Yes, so you've got Ziggy there basically saying that it doesn't matter what happens in this case because no matter what, he believes he's going to remain under this immunity deal. So I don't know if that's accurate or not. I'm not sure if there's any part of the deal that says if the case doesn't go to trial, he wouldn't enjoy the kind of immunity. But it is true that the FBI cannot put forward an informant in a case that they know is lying. And if they did that, they often there have been times when someone was found to be lying. What the defense would do is point out that the informant is a liar and that the FBI knew that the informant was a liar or should have known that the informant was a liar. And that could have a way of leading to the case being thrown out. Of course, so far, we've seen all kinds of corruption in Julian Assange's case that has not resulted in the kind of actions that normally you might have seen, let's say, a half century ago, perhaps in the case of Daniel Ellsberg, Pentagon Papers whistleblower, where there were things that were going on by the Nixon administration. A lot of that has been folded into the apparatus of the Justice Department and accepted as legal, which is why when Trump decides to, the Trump Justice Department decides to revive the Assange case and then bring in a person like Ziggy to bolster it with these hacking claims that cannot be corroborated, that is why they're able to get away with it, because there isn't really anyone in the Justice Department or within our government that is saying this is corruption. They're folding this into the very way that they go after whistleblowers or journalists. You know, the way that he's behaving is atrocious, but how far from the behavior or conduct of informant that the FBI works with to entrap Muslims is this conduct? How far from, you know, some of these other cases that have been questionable over the last 2 decades since the September 11 attacks? So we know that the FBI is working with these kinds of sleazy people. And I think there's an opportunism here on the part of the FBI of finding someone who had been welcomed into the circle, albeit temporarily, and they're using Siggy because they can say he was an associate of Assange. And so there's something about Ziggy that they, I believe that I actually believe that the FBI agents would say, if you ask them, is Ziggy a liar? They would say, well, Ziggy doesn't think he's lying. And then you would say to the FBI, but is what he's saying false? And they would say, well, not technically. He believes it to be true. And, it's his word against Assange's word. And I believe that they would stand in the courtroom and say that it's up to the jury to decide whether Assange is telling the truth or Ziggy is telling the truth. And they would use character assassination on Julian Assange to try and move the needle in their favor. And we'll get to some of the things that they're trying with Ziggy to make him a sympathetic figure. I don't think it works, but I don't really know that the FBI would be so quick to bail on Ziggy, and it would seem that they're not going to bail on Ziggy when it comes to this indictment, and nor do they have to. They're at a stage in the case with the extradition proceedings where this part does not matter. It's not really until Assange is put on trial in the United States that they're going to have to bother with these unfounded and false claims of Ziggy. And by then, he's almost already helped them, because these lies that were in the indictment that was passed and issued 2 months before the main extradition hearing, this was relied upon by the judge to bolster her belief that Julian Assange isn't a journalist. So that's what they wanted to do, is change the way that she viewed Julian Assange so that she could accept the evidence. And then it's on these other technical points related to his mental health that the extradition was not approved. So let's keep going to this next clip, and thank you all for following. I'll get to your questions after I get through the rest of this horrifying, terrifying audio. So here's the next clip.
Áhyggjur mínar voru þær að ef ég myndi segja þeim hvernig og hvað, eins og Landsvirkjun eða virkjun, stjórnarráð síðan og þetta, að ég yrði skotmark íslenskra yfirvalda.
Af hverju?
Og það kom að því að ég segði ef þau fengju afrit af þessum upplýsingum sem ég að segja ykkur. Þau sögðu bara nei, það mun aldrei gerast. Það eina umræðan sem ég hef átt við FBI varðandi
íslenska yfirvalda.
I think I may have played that clip already, so I'll just keep going.
Auðvitað geta það. En það þá bara bolti sem ég tek þegar hann kemur. Ég nenni ekki að pæla í honum fyrr.
Hann svolítið stór, þessi bolti, Siggi.
Já. Ég ekki neita fyrir það. Alls ekki. En gagnast það mér eitthvað að hafa áhyggjur á honum núna? Nei.
Þannig að kvíður þið fyrir því ef þetta er fellt niður?
Að hvað gerist? Já.
Þannig að ef að Julian verður frjáls, þá þið kvíður fyrir því svolítið.
Að hann verður frjáls?
Já.
Ég myndi fagna því.
Ok. En
Gagvart mér persónulega, það verður bara að koma í ljós.
Ok, ég meina, ég veit að þú og Julian áttu rosalega náið samband. Ég meina, þú gerir alveg grein fyrir því að þessi vitnisburður getur kostað hann lífið.
Já.
Hvernig líður með það?
Það verður bara að tala ákveðin, þú tekur ekki 17-18 ára gutta inn í svona.
Ertu reiður út í hann?
Nei.
Ertu sár?
Nei.
Hvaða tilfinningar eru gagnvart Julian í dag?
Ég veit það ekki.
Bara, verður hreinskilin, hvaða tilfinningar hefur gagnvart Julian í dag? Þess að ég hef séð ykkur segja, ég hef séð myndbund af ykkur segja brandara og allt saman.
Ég varaði hann við því að fara þessa leið að hökkurunum. Ég varaði hann líka við því að halda Afganistans gögnunum frá. Julian breyttist eftir að Wikileaks varði eitthvað merki. Leið og þú ætlaðir að fara að birta öll Afganistan stríðsgögnin þar sem að hann neitaði því að redakta 30.000 nöfn.
Okay.
Þar ertu bókstaflega að gera eitthvað þar sem að ég er að koma að því.
Já.
Þar ertu bókstaflega að gera eitthvað sem er áhrif á mannslíf. Þegar menn fá svona Superman heilkenni, þegar menn láta gellur frá Suður-Ameríku sem tala 10 orð í ensku, sjáum alltaf fjölmiðlum meðan dómsmálið hann var ekki að hugsa skýrt. Ég sagði með þess að við hann að fara þess að hakkaralið að senda einhver stuðningsskilaboð til Lulzsek og Anonymous á Twitter til að staðfesta það að við værum Wikileaks. Þetta er fáránlegt. Ég er ekki reiður út í Assange, ég er kannski reiður út í sjálfa mig að tekið þátt í þessu. En
tekið þátt í hverju?
Ég ætla þessu ævintýri.
So he's saying that he's the one who advised Julian Assange to reach out to Lulzsec, which is the group that had people who were hacktivists who the governments went and prosecuted. So he's involved in the conspiracy, or in fact, depending on when he did this, if he was already working with the FBI, he's trying to entrap a journalist into committing crimes. So he's saying that he asked, and then you hear him mention he's a 17 or 18-year-old, and this is where the Justice Department has piggybacked on the idea that Ziggy is this teenager, this vulnerable person who we need to have sympathy for, because Julian Assange was getting him involved in something that was deeply dangerous, and he should have known better than to put Ziggy in these situations. But Julian Assange didn't ask Ziggy to embezzle funds from the WikiLeaks store, and he didn't ask him to be involved in going after underage boys for sex. That's all him. He wasn't involved in the schemes that he's been pursuing for the last 5 to 10 years, where he sets up these fake companies. He didn't ask him to do anything other than be a part of a journalism enterprise and to be involved. And it shouldn't be dangerous. If it is dangerous, then the Justice Department should look at themselves in the mirror and realize why it is dangerous. It's dangerous because the US government and its intelligence agencies are seeking to destroy the editor-in-chief of an online media site that is publishing original documents and engaged in scientific journalism that was groundbreaking, providing people clear pictures and portraits of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And listen to what he says. Listen to how he's talking about the Afghanistan files. And you tell me whether you think this is someone who was coached to say this kind of a thing to the media. It's too sophisticated to talk about a Superman complex, and knowing that that's the kind of thing, as far as character assassination goes, is originated from people within the FBI and our government institutions in the United States. I'm not sure that this is an original thought of Ziggy's. It sounds like something that he was cleared to say in an interview. There's no way that at this point he could not have talked to an FBI agent or some handler who said, if you're going to do the media, these are some things I'd like you to say about Assange, because the Justice Department is not going to do interviews on this case. Attorney General Merrick Garland refuses to make public statements in defense. Secretary of State Antony Blinken refuses to answer questions or say anything about this and defend it to the world. The fact that they have jailed a journalist and are prosecuting him. And so who's going to talk? Well, Ziggy's going to talk. And Ziggy can possibly get some things out there and do so in ways that the FBI or the Justice Department never could. So listening to this part from the audio, it sounds like something he was taught to say. It sounds like something that he wants people to hear that's a talking point. And I suppose out of all the garbled words that come out of his mouth, this is the most clearest thing that he's able to parrot. That looks like something that comes from one of his FBI handlers. And I bet he has multiple handlers. I bet he has people who are keeping a close eye on what he does, just because in order for him to be valuable, there are certain things that he can't do. And as you notice from the audio, there are things that he's trying not to say. But in some instances, he just can't help himself. So he gives up the game a few times to Bjartmar. So here we go. Let's keep going. The next clip. This is a long video. There's quite a bit of sociopathy here for us to dig through.
Það ekkert leyndarmál. Ég var skítfokkinn hræddur. Eins og ég hef svo margoft sagt áður, 18 ára unglingur áttar sig ekki á því hvað hann að gera. Þú ert ekki að spila fokkinn tölvuleik. Þú ert ekki í Sims eða Black, ég spil ekki tölvuleiki, hvað þessi leikir heita, skilur við. Call of Duty,
Reyndar heldur góður, sko.
Já, ok. En þú veist, þú fattar það ekki. Og það það besta. Ég fattar það ekki ennþá í dag. Hvað þetta var, þú veist, það var ekki eins og við værum að birta eitthvað gögn hérna fyrir skólablaðið, skilur.
Nei, þið voru að birta alveg gögn.
Það nefnilega málið og það málið sem maður fattar ekki.
En ég meina, finnst þér eins og þú hafi gert eitthvað rangt með að birta þessu gögn? Finnst þér eins og þú hafi, þú veist, var þetta rangt?
Mér finnst það í dag, já.
Ziggy says he's against publishing. So Ziggy Tordarson, not only does he prey on underage boys, not only does he get involved in embezzlement schemes, not only is he involved in bilking people out of their product and funds, but he's against journalism. He doesn't believe that what WikiLeaks published deserved to be published. Again, probably something you say because you're now a paid FBI informant. And paid maybe not money-wise, but the fact that you have this immunity deal that's going to protect you. And so in service to your handlers, you say something to an Icelandic journalist about the fact that you don't think it was good, it wasn't responsible for WikiLeaks to publish the documents. And notice he's specifically talking about the Afghanistan documents, which form much of the core of the allegations against Julian Assange when it comes to publishing. That they like to say that they're not criminalizing publishing, but they are. And they went after Julian Assange for the Afghanistan war logs. Incredible now, after we've seen the way that has unfolded in the last few weeks with U.S. troops fleeing and everything that the U.S. ever worked for crumbling, with the Taliban now being in charge of Afghanistan and people being under threat who the U.S. was not able to save. But the people who are reckless are not the U.S. military and the war profiteers and the people who are architects, but it's Julian Assange who's exposing this. Or Chelsea Manning gave him the documents, and then WikiLeaks and the staff published it. It's them. They're the ones that are reckless to let us have a full portrait and picture of the way the U.S. was prosecuting the war. And Ziggy's against it. Ziggy says he's against journalism. Let's keep going here.
Það kemur hvergi fram í mínum samningum að
Og það með ekki ræða við fjölmiðla.
nei, það eina sem að þau kannski biðja mig að tala ekki hluti sem að ég hef rætt við það svona alvarlega, skilur.
Ok. En það náttúrulega, eins og ég segi, þetta náttúrulega mjög alvarlegt mál. Og það fullt af hlutum sem þú ert búin að gera hérna. Bara, ég meina, finnst þér að þú ættir að vera inn í þessu ákæruskjali? Með Julian?
Já.
Þið finnst það?
Já.
Þannig að ef Julian ákveða að bjarga raskættunum sér með að skvíla á þig, af því það virðist vera að þú hafi tekið á móti mest öllu þessu gögnum. Þú veist, þú ert fronturinn. Finnst þér ekki að svolítið skrítið að hann að fara að bitna fyrir eitthvað sem að þú gerðir?
Sem að ég gerði? Hann ritstjóri, hann segir þessu sjálfur. Ef þú ert ritstjóri blaðastálpar, þú ábyrgir það ekki.
Þetta strákur.
We'll get back to that part in just a moment. So yeah, do you think you, Ziggy, should be held accountable for your role in this? What about the fact that the United States government could prosecute you? What do you think about that? And I don't think he's really able to process that question. I don't fully believe that Ziggy understands that what we're talking about here is something that maybe he doesn't deserve to be criminalized for it, but because he's gone after Assange, Assange could point to criminal conduct that Ziggy engaged in within WikiLeaks. If Assange is guilty, then Ziggy is guilty too. I mean, there's a lot of people involved in WikiLeaks outside of Ziggy that could be guilty as well. That's why it's such a dangerous case for us to allow this to go forward, because people who are engaged in 21st century journalism and are obtaining hacked materials, are accepting submitted leaked documents, and are pushing the boundaries of press freedom in ways that are good for the public, they are in the crosshairs of the U.S. intelligence agencies who have advocated for the Justice Department to go after this media organization and to destroy it and make it ineffective and to discredit it. And Ziggy doesn't quite recognize and can't. Again, he's serving the FBI, doesn't understand that this could have happened to him if he didn't turn around and work against Julian Assange. So, and again, Ziggy says the editor-in-chief is the one that has all the responsibility, but I have news for him. That's not really how it works. The journalists are being labeled co-conspirators of espionage by the U.S. government. And in fact, I think it's the journalists that are more vulnerable than the editor-in-chief, because the editor-in-chief can claim plausible deniability. So Julian Assange could say that all this stuff that Ziggy did, he had no idea it was going on. So what if he wants to sell out Ziggy? Isn't actually a decent question, other than the fact that it's not likely to happen because he's already cooperating with the FBI. All right, so let's keep going. We're almost at the end of this long clip.
Sem að taldi að þú hefði brotið á sér.
Já.
Málinu hans vísað frá.
Hold on.
Hann finnur ekkert rétt.
This is really important, so let me go back to what was being said.
Þetta strákur sem að taldi að þú hefði brotið á sér.
Já.
Málinu hans vísað frá.
Já.
Hann finnur ekkert réttlæti.
Nei.
Hann fremur sjálfsmorð. Ég ekki að segja við þig að þú berir fulla ábyrgð á því, en þú berð einhver ábyrgð.
Já. Ég veit það.
Okay.
Ég veit það.
Okay.
Believe me. Ég veit það. Alveg 100% ekki. Ég meiri sérlega reyndi að ég talaði við ríkissaksóknara. Ég spurði bara for sake of argument, gætu við tekið þetta mál upp og bara klára það? Og þeir sögðu nei.
Myndirðu vilja vera dæmdur fyrir þetta? Þessi 5 brot sem var vísað frá?
Sumt af þessu sem var vísað frá var bara fáránlegt. Sko. Eitt af málunum sem var fellt niður var skilaboð á MSN, það sem ég spurði. Hvort
það voru 5 mál sem voru felld niður.
En strákurinn sem að drap sig, það hefði átt að vera.
All right, so Ziggy is talking about this case that involved a boy who committed suicide. We know this happened because he wasn't going to have his day in court in order to go after Ziggy or get justice for what Ziggy did to him. And as it's all described, it's hard to believe that Ziggy is someone who is going to talk to the prosecutor openly about whether this boy could actually go to court and pursue a charge against him. That doesn't make sense. I mean, again, listening to him speak, it is clear that this is someone who is not mentally sound. He is suffering from all manner of personality disorders. And again, I'm not a medical professional, but it doesn't seem right to listen to him talk about this. And I think it's even more sad and despicable to hear the way he talks about people who were the targets. He wants to have sex with these people, and he, as you'll hear in this next clip, he can't take no for an answer. And so this is the last thing that was published or is in the post from Stunden. And then I'll wind this down by going through any of the questions you have about Ziggy, and I'll put a bit of a conclusion on this and talk about what this means for the Assange case. We're coming up on an hour, though. This has been going on for a long time.
Þú lofaði honum gullugræn sko, mannst ekkert eftir þessu. Lofaði honum að koma á setja hann bara launaskrá fyrir 1 milljón á mánuði. Einu sem hann þurfti að gera að sofa hjá þér. Og ef hann vildi ekki lengur sofa hjá þér, þá getur hann samt haldið peningunum. Þegar það var búið að skrifa upp á samning. Mannst eftir þessu. Ég meina, þú varst að bullshit hann, sko, en þú áttir ekki allan að pening.
Nei, en þetta er samt vændiskaup. Þetta það. Í skilningi lagana sem
ég ekki að spyrja skilningi lagana.
Það eru dómarnir sem ég fekk.
Ég veit það, en ég að spyrja þig hvað það finnst þetta. Sjálfum.
Í dag?
Já.
Fáránlegt.
Ég meina, þetta beyond vændiskaupið, það ekki. Ég ekki að tala í skilningi lagana, ég bara tala persónutilfinninguna. Þú hefur þrýst á hann unga dreng sem var að safna fyrir íbúð. Þú lofar hann á tölvunni sem hann fekk. Ég meina, þú veist, þú ert mjög mikið að pressa á hann ekki eins og niður samkynningur.
Nei, en hann getur sagt nei.
Hann gerði það.
Ok.
En þú hélst áfram.
Ok. Já. Þannig reynir við fólk, sko?
Whoa. That's how you hit on people, you know? Ugh. Excuse me, I gotta go take a shower. No, I'll finish the broadcast, but to hear that, it's so gross. It's so disgusting. And to know that this is the kind of person that the FBI is aligned with and working. He is responsible, it would seem, for a whole lot of predatory behavior that has hurt people in Iceland, and Iceland has, I guess, allowed the FBI to come in, make this deal, and somehow their hands are tied. The police aren't stopping it. The Ministry of Interior is not stopping it. And they're working with him as the informant against Assange. And let me go through your questions, because thank you for tuning in, the people who have been watching this live. And then for those of you who watch this archive video, thanks for watching the full hour. This is really important. These are amazing clips, but you aren't going to see them broadcast on CNN, MSNBC, or even Fox News, who may want to go against the Biden administration and defend Julian Assange. Maybe Tucker Carlson will prove me wrong, but I doubt that any of these clips make it to the airwaves of even just his show, although he's been moonlighting as an Assange supporter for the public benefit of going against the Biden administration and then the previous Obama administration. But let me just go through what you've got here. First thing was if I could say anything about the legalities of his tendencies in Iceland. And yeah, there have been cases that have been brought against him. And, essentially, he didn't go to prison before this immunity deal. He didn't go to prison because of the fact that Iceland has some sort of guideline that says if you have like sociopathic nature or whatever, that if you can't help yourself, that you don't really get sent to prison, that you're supposed to get, I suppose you're supposed to get mental health treatment. I don't know if he has a therapist. I don't know if there's anybody that can help Ziggy, but he never did any time in prison as far as I know. Yes, thank you, Alexander, for the support. Diani asked, how many procedural irregularities must occur before this case is tossed out? It's a good rhetorical question. I think you mean it rhetorically. And I would say that is the key question at this point. What are we going to hear about next? We've seen the spying on the embassy by UC Global. We've heard about Ziggy now. We know that the FBI confiscated documents that were personal archives of Assange, and they stole legally privileged documents from Assange that would be useful to him putting together his defense of recreating the moments that are at the center of this case. But now those are in the hands of the government. And so what's next? What are we going to hear about next that's unfolded? Is it going to come from the way the Trump administration issued these indictments? Is it going to come from what the Biden administration is doing and continuing this case? Is it going to come from the strategy that they may have for maintaining legal limbo around Assange and manipulating the process, the extradition process abroad? Who knows? We wait to see, because so far this hasn't been enough to get the U.S. government to feel shame and to see Joe Biden and Attorney General Merrick Garland get together and ditch this case. Thank you for applauding the lighting and everything. We have raised the level over here at Shadowproof to be more professional. I'm working with a fine webcam now and no longer using the FaceTime camera in my MacBook laptop. And I'm able to do that because of the support from people like you. So I'm grateful that there are subscribers of the Dissenter newsletter, and I'm grateful that people tune in to the WikiLeaks reporting and donate to ensure that coverage and reporting on Julian Assange's case continues, because then that makes it possible for me to do not only regular but quality journalism, and then every once in a while bring in better aesthetics to what we do. So thank you for that support. And let's see here. All right, I'm not totally familiar with the politics of Iceland as well as far as the pedophilia allegations might go, so I can't really speak to that. But the way I will conclude here is to just say a few basic things, and then I'll plug my newsletter, which you really should be subscribing to at this point. But doesn't this make you long for the days of Adrian Lamo, when he was the one who was pretending to be a priest, and like this person who was on the internet and told Chelsea Manning that she could give him a confession and he would keep it in confidence, but in the end it turned out he was actually betraying her and passing along the information that he was obtaining to the FBI so that she would later be arrested and found out as the source of the documents that were passed along to WikiLeaks. Ziggy truly makes Adrian Lamo look like a grade school teacher, somebody who you could forgive. And I truly mean that this is a step higher in the sleaziness category, far more sleazy than Adrian Lamo. And, I think he ended up dying from drug addiction or abuse of his medication. And so in that sense, I have a little bit of sympathy for what he was going. I don't have any sympathy for what Ziggy is doing here, because, he continues this behavior. And so there's that aspect, and I bring that in from my coverage of the court-martial against Chelsea Manning, of seeing him testify and recognizing those moments when your skin started to stand up and you had goosebumps because of the things you were hearing from Adrian Lamo. But the ick factor from Ziggy is even worse. It's far worse than anything I ever heard come out of Adrian Lamo's mouth in the courtroom at Fort Meade. The other thing that I would say is that Ziggy is the key witness. He's a key Assange witness, but his testimony at this moment, at this critical hour, is not the thing that's going to save Julian Assange from being extradited to the United States. What is crucial is saving the testimony from the doctor that the prosecution service in England is trying to discredit, Michael Kopelman. It's saving all of the assessments and the testimony that we have about Julian Assange's impulses and the mental health disorder that he has that would make it oppressive for health reasons to extradite him to the United States. It's making sure that the High Court of Justice does not lose sight of the Lori Love approach. And I think, fortunately, Julian Assange is in good hands, having Fitzgerald as his attorney, who was involved in the Lori Love case and can stand there and defend to the High Court of Justice, upholding the lower court's decision that said Julian Assange should not be sent to the United States and be put on trial. And then, of course, it'll go to the Supreme Court, and we'll have to have many of these arguments again, so long as Julian Assange prevails at the High Court of Justice level. But this is all coming up on October, at the end of October. And all of this that we just talked about right now is not going to come up. And it's not because the attorneys for Assange don't think it's important, but because it is not a factor in preventing the extradition from going forward. What it is important to all of this that we hear from Ziggy, everything that we know that the FBI is doing with Ziggy, this is really for the trial in the United States. If we would get to that really terrible, dark moment, and if we were to see a journalist put on trial in the United States, then all the work that Stündchen has done would be crucial to the defense, would be really, and right now it's just that it colors our history. and it shows the corruption of this political case. And so I thank you all for tuning in. We've gone for well over an hour. There will be a Dissenter Weekly show tomorrow. But again, I remind you that every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we do a show on the latest whistleblower stories from the last week, and we share updates on Julian Assange. And because this is a deep dive into the audio from Ziggy, I didn't want to save this for the Dissenter Weekly show. Thought it was important to dig through this because, again, there just isn't U.S. media out there that understands the case fully or is going to take the time to go through it in this amount of detail. So I hope this is helpful to some people. I hope that there are journalists or reporters out there that stumble on this video and maybe borrow or steal from it and use it to put together reporting on this aspect of the case that still deserves attention. The fact that Ziggy is considered a reliable informant by the FBI is scandalous. A level of scandal beyond the fact that Julian Assange is charged in this in the United States and awaiting extradition in Belmarsh prison. So we need more digging into that. And I think if you dig deeper into Ziggy, you're going to truly unravel the ugliness behind the Trump administration's determination to bring Assange to the United States and put him on trial in service to the CIA. Because this really is a case that starts from the CIA being offended and embarrassed when they saw their precious jewels thrown around the internet and published by WikiLeaks, the different offensive cyber warfare tools that were exposed as the Vault 7 materials. And then you hear Mike Pompeo come out, and this bloated mess of a human stands before everyone, puffing around, boasting about how they're going to go get Julian Assange and that he shouldn't have First Amendment rights, that Julian and WikiLeaks are Russian assets, and that he's sick and tired of seeing the U.S. government be exposed for what it really is as an empire, and then they're going to go after him. And it wasn't long after that a case was put together and Julian Assange was squeezed and pressured and then run out of the embassy, the Ecuador embassy, as they got Ecuador's presidential administration to turn on Julian Assange. And so now he's really a man without a country. He doesn't have any support. He had some help from Ecuador temporarily, but Australia won't stick up for him beyond the fact that I think they've mentioned to the U.S. that they would allow him to come to the country of Australia as part of a treaty. But that is the bare minimum, perhaps even below the bare minimum of what they can do for one of their citizens. And he's in the UK without the UK caring about him. And then you've got the Biden administration that wants to tell everyone about all the other authoritarian countries that are treating journalism as a crime and how that's wrong, but they won't acknowledge that they are criminalizing journalism themselves. And so the fact of the matter is that as we conclude here, the U.S. government needs to continue to have all aspects of this case exposed and given the maximum amount of attention. And the only way they're going to back down before this case runs its course is if they are shamed into dropping the charges. So that is and should be the goal of activists and supporters. And it also should be the goal of journalists who, in their self-interest, should recognize that they do not want to be in this position that Julian Assange is in ever in the future. And so thank you. I appreciate all the support that you guys show me. Thank you for tuning in. There's been several of you who have watched this entire stream. You're incredible. Thank you. This is thedissenter.org. If you go and subscribe to this newsletter, it's a free newsletter, but there's also a paid portion. You want to fund and keep reporting coming on Whistleblowers, as well as WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, you can become a paid subscriber. There's exclusive content that goes out every week. But then if you can't afford to do that, being a free subscriber is just as good. And to share that newsletter and to let people know the truth about what the United States does to those who dissent, and especially those who challenge the national security state, coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It's more important than ever to defend national security whistleblowers who have been dissenting against the security state. And so I thank you all for tuning in to this live broadcast. And I'll close by saying, go to Stunden. It's stunden.is, stunden.is. The article that has all of these postings is his own words. Assange witness explains fabrications, digging into the crimes and deceptions of Ziggy Tredarson. Comes from Bjartmar Anderson, who somehow managed to maintain his cool and get through 9 hours with this sociopath. And they deserve all the credit in the world for doing this and helping to unravel this corruption. And then I come along and I am amplifying it so more people are aware of this development, this person, the identity of Ziggy Tredarson. So thank you for watching, and we'll be back soon. But until then, I'll see you around.